just have a bunch of stuff writing.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to make a start.
All right. So it's nice in the room. People are chatting, which is great. I think we're gonna get started. So then people who are online can leave when they're done, and we'll continue here with some discussions. But so it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this lunchtime, the first of our lunchtime seminar series. So Fiona Broussard is going to be talking about making industry connections. And I know that she's got a lot of great things planned, so I'll just turn the time right over to her. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, Jessica. And welcome everyone to our inaugural lunchtime seminar series. I'd like to start just by acknowledging the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land we are gathered, and to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And here I have a photo of our Aboriginal gardens from the northwest part of our campus near the roundabout. If you haven't explored it, then I'd encourage you to take a walk. It is September after all. So today I'd like to talk to you about how we can work together, finding and approaching industry collaborators. And just for some housekeeping, if you're on Zoom and you have some questions, do feel free to come off mute and let us know. I'm not logged into Zoom, so I can't see anything in the chat. I won't see your hands up, etc. So just feel free to interrupt if you've got some questions, that's fine. So we're a research-intensive university. We want to do more research, but we're constrained by the availability of funding. We have competitive grants, which are a solid avenue for our faculty to fund our research, but we know that this has a ceiling. In order to operate and operationalise, in fact, our faculty's research strategy, which is to diversify and grow, we've got to look beyond the ARC and NH and MRC. And so funding accessible via industry and government partners is where we need to look. So for us, the business development team, which is Adam Wizaneski sitting beside me here, and myself, for us, success is finding ways to fund more research collaborations. This is our goalpost. So I'd like to explain that we have adopted a research pipeline approach in our faculty BD team. So what does this mean? So this is visualised here by a funnel where our collaborative research activities begin at the top in their life, and then once they're socialised or pitched to an industry partner or government partner, and they're qualified, they enter into this funnel and they move along in time. The activity moves into the proposal phase, which is what you would be quite familiar with, where you're putting things down onto paper, such as budgets and outcomes, deliverables, etc. And then once that passes the success of acceptance or not, it moves into a contract negotiation where the legal terms and conditions are put down onto paper. And once it's executed, which in our world, it's the dean who's the person who's able to execute that contract, unless it's over $500,000, and then it goes to the provost, and the other party obviously signs their part as well. That's when the project formally starts for you. So today, our topic is wholly about the very beginning of that pipeline, how to get ideas into it. So I'd like to begin by explaining the differences between a grant and a collaboration. It's important to realise this because it changes the way and your mentality in interacting with the other parties. So a grant, it's transactional. There are defined rules, there is a defined process, it's usually a single shot, it's arm's length, it's inappropriate for us to try to influence the assessors. And it's implicit that the funder knows that the success may not be guaranteed. If we contrast this with a collaboration, we are talking about a relationship. There are no written guidelines. The process, the timeline, it's amorphous, and it will be bespoke and it will change every time. It will be an iterative process. You may have to have 12 conversations with a collaboration partner before they feel like they trust you enough in order to consider funding. It is personal. It is all about the human being, you, and the people on the other side. And furthermore, there is an expectation that there will be tasks performed and outcomes delivered. I would like to make a point that this is optional. We're not here to compel. but we are here to be of assistance to those who are seeking it. So how to go about developing your partnerships? How do you take that first step? This is where you need to start to make connections. You need to build your profile. You need to let people know who you are and what you're about. And here I have some examples for you to consider and potentially weave into your own lives. When you have the opportunity to do presentations, as you would often throughout the year, irrespective of whether they're academic enough or not, take those opportunities to present at forums, at roundtables, etc. This is a really simple way of getting people to know who you are and what you're about. Consider writing thought or conversation pieces, such as in The Lens or The Conversation. And if they're not available to you, then outlets like Twitter and LinkedIn, you can write thought and conversation pieces there. And these are really simple ways to let people know who you are and what you're about. Word of mouth, being there, being present, going to networking events, keeping in touch with your existing networks, having conversations with lots of different people will help you to link to new partners. I mentioned briefly social media, LinkedIn. This is what industry and government use to look you up. There's over 800 million people who use this, and it is the first place I go to find out who you are and what you're about. And it's the same for those outside of our organisation. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile and you want to work with industry, I'd recommend that you change that. If you'd like an example of someone within our university who I think has got a good LinkedIn profile, take a look at Rebecca Brown, our DVCR. Her LinkedIn profile is good. How's your Monash webpage? Have you looked at it recently? I use these to look you up. And often when it's out of date, it's really hard to know who you are and what you're about. So perhaps that's a simple thing that you can fix as well. And finally, tell your colleagues what you do. They can and will be your advocates. So they may be sitting and having a conversation with DELP or, CSL. And they'll say, well, actually, that's not what I do, but my colleague over here does that. Let me introduce you. So over the past few weeks, I've taken the opportunity to interview some of the people in our faculty who've done this before and to collect their lived experience. And so the next 7 slides are about those individuals. And I just encourage, if you're on the call and you're mentioned, please come off mute and take over, because I think it's far more authentic if it comes from you directly. So the first one I have is Perrin. Perrin, are you out there? Okay. So Perrin, when I interviewed him and asked him how did he get started, he said it was actually his mentor, Barry Hart, who was the one who opened the door for him. And he described himself as being in the slipstream. Fast forward to today, and he said that one of his latest collaborations came from a very simple conversation with a catchment management authority manager. So Perrin works in water. And it led to a successful ARC linkage. And he said it started just by talking about ideas and throwing them around the room. They had multiple meetings over a period of time. And this developed into a relationship and became a foundation for trust. So he said he was communicating at the right level within that organisation. So it was someone who had ability to make decisions regarding budget. And this mutual interest evolved into the new collaboration, and they were successful through the ARC linkage program. His tips to you are be present, invest the time, be in the room, be engaged, make a contribution. It will help give you perspective of what the industry partners' challenges are. So moving on to Lincoln in physics and astronomy. So he told me about a different experience in that it was actually a student project through the Global Challenges that provided introductions to new collaborators. So he explained that an industry partner had come to the university and was involved in an ecology project through the Global Challenges program, but they needed some expertise in optics, and so he got involved. And this research partner, this education partner, I guess is what they were back then, they returned the following year to do another type of student project in the Global Challenges. And so the relationship with the faculty research staff continued to develop further, and they started talking about bigger ideas, research ideas, and larger scale projects and what they were doing right then. And they started talking with the partners of the partner. And so it grew into multiple organisations. They had a crack at a few different grant funding opportunities, which were unsuccessful. And then, lo and behold, I think it was the end of last year or the beginning of this year, they were, a near miss for a DOR grant, and DOR had some spare money left over in their budget, and they contacted Lincoln and said, we'd like to fund you. And so that's now, we're doing the contract work now, and it's almost $1 million, and it's 5 parties. And that started from a student project and getting involved just because the opportunity presented. Kelly in chemistry. So she had a different experience again. She said it was a high-profile person in her field from overseas that connected her to a local industry partner. And it happened 5 years ago when she was at a conference, and she'd introduced herself to this high-profile person from, I think it might have been Warwick in the UK. And they saw straight away that Kelly could bring something that was missing to their own industry collaboration. And so they offered to connect her to their industry partner, who just so happened to be co-located here in Melbourne. And it all started from there. And so since then, she explained that she's had the opportunity to jump on a number of subsequent projects and it's built about a level of trust. And this trust that the industry partner has brings this sense of endorsement, and new opportunities come her way. She said it's taken quite a lot of her time and effort, and there was little to show for those first few years in an academic sense. But now she said it's paying dividends. And her tips are bringing added value to someone's existing relationship can make it win-win for everyone. So in talking with Pete Betts from EAE, he also said that it was his supervisor that made those first introductions and acted as an advocate for introducing new industry contacts. He said that shortly after he finished his PhD, his supervisor gave him the task of writing the proposal for the grant together with the industry partner. These days, he said he gets most of his industry engagements from showing up to industry conferences, and he gives a presentation that not only showcases his academic skill set, but he links it to something of industry interest. And so he went on to say that most of his cited academic work has actually come from industry projects. And so his advice was, once you get that start, you start to build a reputation, and then people will know who you are and they reach out to you. And so by listening to the industry collaborators' challenge or problem, issue, and then blending your own academic aspirations and ideas around that context. And he said you need to realise that this will take time, possibly years. Then we had Julie, also from EAE. Her experience in getting started was different again. It was actually back to her student days. Hosted at the Bureau of Meteorology, and there was a visiting scientist and who ended up connecting her to a visiting student opportunity. They had initially encouraged her to apply for a PhD scholarship in the UK because she'd wanted to travel, but she said that she'd been unsuccessful with that application. And so what she did that was critical is she actually went back to the visiting scientist to say thank you for that suggestion for the PhD scholarship, but unfortunately I wasn't successful. And that person generously said, well, let me ask my mates in the States. And so that's where it came about, an opportunity for her to be a visiting student. And she ended up staying for 7 years. And it opened up a whole range of new work experiences for her. And she said that her mentor in the States would continue to refer work her way, collaboration opportunities, speaking opportunities. And this all helped to get her known in her field. And fast forward to today, and she's still working and getting funded by her US collaborators. Andreas, you're in the room. Would you like to speak to this slide? Just turn on the mic in front of you.
Yeah, as always, that helps if you've got, when you first start, you've got something to help you out. I started at CSIRO. They've got a whole organization to help you out with finding industry contacts. That does make life much easier, and it makes it easier working in a group rather than as an individual. My first ARC grant, linkage grant here at Monash, did involve quite a bit of cold calling. Not just myself, but Mohan, who I worked with, did a lot of that. That's hard work to do it that way. It can be done, but it's quite a lot of work. In general, I think starting small, thinking about your track record, what have I done previously, and working your way up. As everybody else said, it takes years to do this. I think in general, in maths, we have the problem that we don't have a natural industry sector, right? That you don't normally want to sit and say, I'm the expert in some particular industry thing. You have some mathematical expertise that can be applied in a range of different problems. And so you need to then collaborate with other people that actually work in those industry sectors. And I guess at Monash, we have a bunch of institutes that try to do this kind of channeling and combining things to industry sectors that may work for you or may not work for you. Monash hasn't been tribal, so things didn't happen within faculty. So if you're in the wrong faculty, you might have a tough time, but that's the way things work.
Thanks. And then we have Richard, who I can see is on the Zoom call. Richard, would you like to speak to the slide?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks for getting in touch. Yeah, so my situation was that, I mean, I have quite a few different external collaborations, but one in particular that's been very long-term has been with the Phillip Island Nature Park, where we've been working on penguin biology. And they actually approached me initially because this was very shortly after I arrived at Monash. And we just started things low key in that I really kind of wanted to establish a bit of a relationship initially and find out what their priorities were. So we started with a co-supervised honours project. And I think that was a really good first way to start, because it meant that they had to demonstrate some genuine investment in the sense of being willing to put some time into co-supervising this student. And things developed well from there, because it meant that it provided some continuity in the relationship that then developed into a couple of linkage grants and ongoing honours student supervision. But then also we've co-supervised, I think, about half a dozen different PhD students with a bunch of different research publications that came out of it. And in the sense then of having an external collaborator, what we gain from what Monash gains from them potentially is access to long-term data sets, where there's an external collaborator who's working on some long-term project that's beyond the lifespan of an individual PhD project or beyond the lifespan of an individual discovery or linkage project grant. So in fact, we work with data sets that go, we have 30-year data set on penguin biology and response to environmental change that our honours students kind of contribute to each year by collecting more field data. And so I wanted to point that out as being something that that I bring to the relationship, which is true in many, many situations with industry partners, which is access to students. And I think that's perhaps something that maybe we undervalue a bit, probably less so from the honours student perspective, but PhD students in particular, in that we can bring someone with their scholarship. So it's essentially, there's no cost to the partner. We can bring someone who is going to work full time on this project. And of course, they require training, and of course there's supervision, but that's something really valuable that industry partners, generally speaking, otherwise don't have access to. And when I think of all of the significant industry partnerships I've had, they have all involved PhD students, which bring that additional value to the partner. I think that's all I wanted to say, Fiona, unless there's any
thanks,
questions
Richard.
when
That's
we
great.
have it at the end. Sure.
So just rounding off that part about ideas for making connections, here are a few more. So if you're writing some kind of non-academic publication, perhaps there's an industry expert that you may consider bringing in to participate with you. Co-authoring such a publication might be something that's novel and interesting and different for them, and a way to help to build a relationship for you. Thinking about the extension of your involvement in another researcher's work, it could evolve or pivot in a new direction. So you're not cannibalising that person's opportunity, but otherwise you're actually growing a new one from that existing relationship. We do have organised events here at the university, partnerships forums, industry visits to campus. So AIM Day is what we're planning with maths later this year as an example of bringing industry to campus to talk about their challenges and issues. Attending trade shows if there's an application area or an end user that's of interest to you, because we know that industry won't attend academic conferences, so going to them is the solution. There is the direct approach. We do have people who come through our front door looking for particular capability, and usually someone like Adam and I might know who to go to and try to connect in accordingly when we see an opportunity is a good fit. Consultancy work and tenders. I know they're not for everybody, but Perrin did mention that a lot of his relationships came from these kinds of beginnings. So it's something to consider if it's a good match to your longer term activities. And as been mentioned before about PhD students, they go and get a job and work in industry. And so they're also a source for partnerships for you to continue. So once you've actually made those connections, what are the next steps you need to consider about converting that into something that's going to look like a collaborative project? So these are the kinds of things that you need to consider. And I like this quote about beginning with the end in mind. So remember, the end goal is to get funding to do more research. You need to have a think about what is going to make the partnership successful. And at the crux of this is a sharing of a mutual value position. How do you know what value the other side's going to get out of it? Well, you need to develop your knowledge and appreciation of your partner. You need to understand what are their needs, what are their goals. And you can only do that by talking to them, by visiting them in their own setting, if you can possibly do that. A shared mutual value position has to be advantageous to both the organisation as well as the human beings involved in it, so the individuals, because you need those individuals within those partner organisations to be your champion. They will sell the idea internally to their minders and to their budget purse holders. It needs to be something that's not only good for their organisation in that financial, clear return of investment sense, but it also needs for that human being something that they're going to derive from it. Perhaps it's going to augment their CV and their career interests. Maybe it's just something that they have a deep-seated belief or attachment to. Whatever it is, you need to be aware that that value position needs to be good for you and good for them. And expect that this is going to be iterative. It's not a single-shot game. You're going to have to build trust, and that takes time. You're going to have to be tenacious. So some points to consider. Collaborative research, obvious benefits. This is a way for you to have impact. If you co-develop your research ideas so that it's something that's wanted or needed by the outside world, then you are going to bring an opportunity for achieving true impact. Another simple benefit is by connecting to your partner, you can connect to their partners and it grows the network further. However, these things come with challenges, and I think the key challenge in collaborative research is the idea of time and timing. It will take time, your time, to manage these relationships and the expectations. You've got to keep the relationship warm. So that means phone calls, visits, emails, sending things their way that you think might be an interesting read for them. Timing. Industry and government have budget cycles too, just like we're going through a budget period right now. And we need to get things on the radar for the forthcoming year. They're the same. And it might actually take a number of months in order to get that money allocated for your purpose on their radar and then into their budget books for the forthcoming year. There is this natural incompatibility between our timelines in academia and industry. So if you're working with an ASX listed company, they're doing quarterly reporting for their finances. We talk in blocks of 3 years because we're doing PhD projects. So you just need to understand that there's this disconnect in timing. Another thing is our granting bodies aren't prompt. We understand this, but for industry, the idea of having to wait 6 months to get a yes or no grant decision is incomprehensible. So we need to have to explain these, and this is a challenge, time and timing. I think this might be one of my last slides here, and this is about the things that you need to consider in managing expectations. You are dealing with human beings, and some of the things that you need to talk with them might feel uncomfortable, and talking about money is one of them. You just need to accept that talking about money is always going to be uncomfortable. But if you've established a trusted relationship, it should be possible. And I find the best approach is just to be open and honest. When they're working in business, they understand that they've got to make profit, you've got to make revenue, you've got costs. So they would understand that universities really are no different and that we have to get funding in order to cover the costs to do the research. I mentioned just before about the unfamiliarity that industry has with granting bodies. They will not know about these schemes that you might be able to access to help leverage. So you have to explain what is a linkage, what is a CRC, and explain those kinds of schemes that could be used by an industry partner in order to help move things forward and leverage their dollars and make it go further. They may not understand the in-depth requirements if you're doing a grant funding application and how it comes to be, the development stages. So you'll have to manage their expectations through that, as well as that timing delay that I alluded to. And also the uncertainty in a funding decision. It's not guaranteed. So when you're working through this with your industry partners, it's always a good idea to have a plan B in mind. If this is unsuccessful, what could we do next? You may be in the situation where you have several partners to manage at once. So you need to make sure you have a clear champion in each one of those organisations that you're in dialogue with, and you can see where this will take time. When working with multiple partners, it's also important to try to eliminate any kind of disparity or perceived disparity. So a financial contributing partner, so someone who's bringing 200,000 a year to your activity, and then you've got another partner who may not be bringing any kind of cash along, but they're giving access to, as Richard says, a 30-year-long data set, which is invaluable for the project. So you've got to make sure that any kind of perceived disparity is avoided when managing multiple partners. They're all important. And the obvious one of research scope creep. You're working on a topic that clearly you're interested in, and you've got to make sure that you manage expectations of the partner to stick to the scope and not creep outside it, despite it being interesting. And finally, clear communications and meetings. Nothing annoys an industry partner more than being left in the dark. It is better to over-update them than to under-update them. And just keep that in mind, even if you're going through the academic process of rejoinders, for example, for an industry hub, let them know, ask them if they want to make any contributions. That was some recent feedback that I heard from a partner, was the academic did not even let us know they were going through the rejoinder phase for this ARC hub, that we were looking to invest several $100,000 per year, and they were deeply offended. So it is better to have clear communications and overdo it than under. They'll let you know if you're talking too much. So in conclusion, the BD team, we are here to help you. We want to see you start new conversations and support you in that. So come talk to us if you think you're ready for us to help you take the next steps. And I open the floor to your questions. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak up?
Maybe should we thank Fiona first?
You're welcome. Let's take that off. Augustine, do you want to speak into the microphone?
Okay, sorry. Thanks. So, yeah, I'm Augustine. So I've been in touch with recently about actually a contact I have with the industry, and where I think I'm in the area of starting at the very start of starting a relationship. So can you say a bit more about protection of IP? Because right away, before even talking to me, they wanted to sign an NDA.
Sure.
And I reached out to you, and then the information I got was very obscure. I just wanted to know, can I sign or not?
So if we are wanting to talk with a potential partner and we think that we might have information either from them or from ourselves that's private, confidential, potentially regarding IP or trade secrets, etc., then we have a really fast and efficient way of covering both parties. And through our contract management office, the CMO, we have what's available template NDAs, non-disclosure, confidentiality agreements, and they can either be for us sharing our information or us receiving the outside party's information, or two-way. So there's three scenarios there. It's really fast turnaround if we use a Monash template. We can use an external party's template for a confidentiality agreement, but the CMO needs to review it first, so it takes a bit longer.
Well, I signed the NDA and I had that chat with the company because they were...
The issue with you signing it is that you're not actually a legal designate, so it means nothing. So even though we're staff, we're not actually legally able to sign on behalf of our organisation because we're members of staff, not sole traders. So if you were operating for, Augustine Schiffer and Proprietary Limited, you could sign for yourself, but you're not. You're employed by Monash University, and so a representative from the Monash University has to sign. It's really fast and simple. For CMO, it's Sean, the director there. Otherwise, people like our dean can sign as well. But for a confidentiality agreement, we would just have someone from our CMO sign for it. So we can fix that up for you, Augustine. Because at the moment...
But let's say they say no, if we start, in order to start the conversation, you need to sign our NDA.
Okay.
And I send it to you. How long would it take? Because, for example, sometimes it's true that it seems that the
external parties set one. So it usually takes them a couple of days to turn it around. They're very quick.
Oh, okay.
And look, the CMO office is excellent. I'd recommend using their services. It's pain-free.
Okay. And sorry, and the second question is, for example, with this this entity, they sometimes seem to be willing results fast because they also have their deadlines. I'm in a bit in a gray area where I don't think I'm in a position to ask for them any funding at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be the process to start as soon as possible? The actual work in the lab.
It sounds like you're much further down that pipeline than what we were talking about earlier. It sounds like there's ideas already that they're wanting you to perform some kind of service or
they want something very specific in a time scale of 8 weeks, for example.
So we call this a consultancy. And so what we do is that we put a scope together of what are they wanting from us and how long are we able to actually deliver what they want. So in engineering, they do this all the time. We don't do so much of them here in science because just the nature of our work being more fundamental. So the way it's handled in a professional sense here at Monash is it's scoped, the outcomes are documented, there's a formula, a costing tool used to work out how much of your time and the equipment to order to arrive at a price that would then be given to the external party. And then it would be contracted through a consultancy agreement. And if they wanted to own the outputs and intellectual property, then the price is such. And if they were happy to share and we own the outputs, then the price is something different again. So it's according to what it is that's been wanted. The thing to note, it's really important to know, is that whilst we are a university, we still have financial imperatives. So the faculty, if we were a business, we would not be in business. We lose money every year. So I can't remember what it is, but it'd be something of the order of, $25 million in the red every year. The only reason why we stay in business is because our siblings in the Monash family from business and economics and education and the like subsidise those who do research because it's expensive. So it's not right for external companies to come to us and expect us to work for free. That is not us being good, curators. We have a duty here at a university to use our infrastructure and our smarts in a way that's
Cash in terms of your compensation. There was the example of.
So if it's a research services, I don't understand why it wouldn't be.
A PhD or student, right? And so they're not putting money into the scholarship, but they're getting use of a PhD student.
So I guess we need to understand what is it, because
But
at the moment,
somehow the PhD student benefits from doing that research, right? So there is some.
is this part of their project?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's different again.
Right.
So
But
that's not a fee
actually-
for service.
so it's not providing I guess if you're providing a service, I can understand why you might charge something. But if you're entering into some sort of scientific investigation where you could potentially lead to a publication, is it fair to charge them?
So that sounds like a collaboration rather than a consultancy. And I think really what we should do is offline is understand what it is and have some specifics, and then we can go from there to give you some guidance.
Yeah. Okay. Just trying to. So let's hypothesize on a very specific case where I feel that. Well, it's not very hypothetical because it's actually quite realistic. But if I get into this realm of consultancy, I feel that the industry will say, "Well, we're not interested," and then we're losing on this opportunity of having grad students experience this engagement with industry, but also the potential for LPs. So that's where I see a great opportunity. As I agree, there is a potential for an LP maybe, but that's a probability. It's not 100%, right? And I do see the probability of being 100% if I tell them, look, it's a consultant. Now it's from the point of view of Monash. What you're asking me is defined as a consultancy. This is what much we'll charge. They would end the Zoom discussion. So what do you advise?
Jessica, I can see you want to say something.
So we have built into this new costing and pricing model the option of giving companies a discount. But I do think that it's important for them to know, look, by working on this, we're not charging you for this because we think this is an important thing to build. But this is what the discount that we're giving you, something like that. I mean, so you're shaking your head on that. So you need to talk to Fiona, I think, to figure out what it is. But I mean, certain benefits do come out, and we do give people discounts regularly. But if there's no long-term benefit, right? So if you're getting an LP, then eventually there's money coming in. If you're getting a grad student experience, then presumably there will be money coming in through some of these new government schemes, et cetera. But there should begin with the end in mind. If the end is eventually we're going to get the end, it may not be money coming in. It may be amazing project in this area that we didn't have access to otherwise, but you need to be careful there that you're not giving away all of your rights to publish. So I do recommend very strongly talking to Fiona about this.
So when we look at, because we're making investment decisions, this is what this is. It's research investment decision making. And so there's matrix that I use as a tool to help guide our decision matrix. 4 quadrants. One is this interesting? And this talks about, is this good science? Do we want to get out of bed and do this? So is it interesting? The next quadrant is this the direction that we want to go? And this talks about alignment strategy. So not just strategy for you as a scientist, but also faculty and organisational strategy, Monash's strategy. The third quadrant is, are we going to get paid? And that's self-explanatory from my point of view. The fourth quadrant is it our duty? And this speaks to what is our duty as a university. Should we be doing this? And that's teaching students. That is curating the body of knowledge and using the built environment that we're custodians of in a way that's wise, and also creating new knowledge for the future. So that's the investment decision matrix that we use when deciding whether to do things or not. Okay, we've probably dealt with that question enough, and I think that we probably need to have a talk offline to work out where you need support, August. Are there any other questions? Are you able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Paul O'Leary. I'm a postdoc working out of chemistry, and I'm currently looking at applying for a ARC industry fellowship.
Great.
That's recently been announced and put into motion. I've got industry contacts. I'm sort of from industry, sort of coming back into academia. And I'm going into meeting number 2 with my potential industry partner next week. And I was hoping whether you could fast track me with some of the information on legalities, NDAs, CDAs.
Oh, absolutely.
So my first question is, what does CMO stand for?
Contracts Management Office.
Cool. I mean, I could look at the website for all of this.
Why don't we help you by giving you the link? And Adam here.
Yeah.
Is...
Look, I could do that myself, obviously, if I'm postdoc, I can figure this stuff out, but it's next week and I don't have a lot of time.
No, we welcome you coming we're here to be of support. As I said, our goals are finding more ways to fund our research.
Okay, so you reckon the contract management office will have
help you with an NDA?
Because it'd be good for me to go look. These are our template CDAs. You can take them away, have a look at them, that sort of thing. That's my only question.
Great, thanks. Anyone else?
I have a question. I think my name's Matt Gabbett. I'm a PhD student on behalf of Fleet here. Fleet's and Centre for Excellence in Physics faculty. We're particularly interested in developing new partnerships. And I think one of the questions that always comes up is how do you identify those partnerships? And so I only went over that a little bit today. But I think as far as a lot of the examples that were given anecdotally, I think at least anyway, a lot of partnerships were formed, but I'm not sure if they was thought out so much as people had come to the partners, which is really interesting. Obviously, I think there's clear things like industry conferences and things like that to be able to go to. But do you have any further advice on how you actually seek out those initial points that you might want to go and contact?
Yes. So we can have a conversation with you offline and talk through some ideas on how to actually scout and prospect for industry connections. So if you have a short list of company names already, what we might be able to do to try to find some points of contact to, entry points in to have conversations, whether that be through existing networks or cold calling. Yeah, we can help you with some ideas there. Hi.
Press the button. Okay, great. I'm Gary. Hi. So my quick question was, what sorts of organizational entities classify as industry, right? So. Oh,
it's so broad. Yes. So if you think about how the federal government classifies research income, it's a useful framework to talk through that. So they use this HERTZ classification. HERTZ 1 is your ARC, NH and MRC competitive stuff. HERTZ 2 is all other Australian government. So Department of Primary Industries in New South Wales, so a state government, or a Department of Defence, that's a federal, or a city of Monash, a municipality. So there's all those kinds of entities that are, yes. So on a linkage partner, it's important to note that the funding that they bring must come from a non-government appropriation source. So you can't double dip government money to get more government money. So say if it was a rural development corporation, like the Grains Rural Development Corporation, they may have money in their bank account that has come from licensing of intellectual property. So it's come from a commercial source. It hasn't come from a government source, for example. So that would be a legitimate way of a.
Does that get rather difficult if you've got an organisation that receives both government and private income streams? So essentially, how do you identify which of that money, right? So they've got a single account and it's
them.
Okay.
They would do it. So CSRO can do that. They'll have, separate accounts that is money that's not appropriation. And so then that third category of HERTZ income is everything else. So it's Australian for-profit business, so ASX listed companies, international, the same, international businesses, not-for-profit, both domestically and also internationally. So they're things like charities, then philanthropy. So these are, people who might be benevolent trusts, foundations, individuals, and then international government. So, funding from the US Department of Agriculture, for example. And so they're largely the big container of different organisations.
Great, thanks.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, then let's thank Fiona again. And thanks everyone for coming along. Next week, we're going to have Sylvia Dropulich speaking about how to interact with media. So that should also be good. But meanwhile, those of you who are here in person, feel free to eat more lunch, hang out and chat, ask some quieter questions or whatever. And those who are online, thanks for coming. And we'll see you later.
Well, there'll be a break. I think there's a break.